Absolutely not.
All right. So here's my conversation starter.
Oh boy.
It's not even controversial at all this time. Or
Oh,
maybe it
that's a
is.
bummer.
We'll figure out if we can make it controversial, and then we'll run with it. Data structures and algorithms. How much experience and knowledge and education and practice, how much do you have with those, like high level data structures and algorithms? How much experience do you have with those?
Now, are you talking about logarithms or algorithms?
Ugh. Algorithms. Although algorithms can include logarithms.
It's
Fun fact.
So James, I haven't told you this. My son's gotten into the Rubik's Cube. Like
Yay.
hardcore. Like I made him a
Nice.
very terrible looking Rubik's Cube cake for his birthday.
Oh, pictures or it didn't happen.
I'll send him. It looks awful.
I expect no less. Or no more. Or no less. I don't know.
To be expected.
Yes.
But it's funny to hear him talk about algorithms. He'll be like, yeah, I did this algorithm on my Rubik's Cube. And it always makes me think, a logarithm or algorithm?
Yeah, just go ahead and start him early. You mean logarithm? Don't use the wrong thing.
Yeah, I groaned because recently I decided to just take an interview to like keep my skills up. And, you know, I've got like over 10 years in the industry. Every bit of code I've ever written is like published online. I've got blog posts, YouTube videos. And like literally the first thing they asked me to do was a 60-minute take-home test for data structures and algorithms. And I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm done with this interview.
Resign.
And I literally thought to myself, I should use ChatGPT to solve this. You know, I don't know if that's one of those karma things that's going to come back and bite you in the butt, you know, but if you understand the code, you understand the code. So you can explain it.
Did you do that?
I am dragging my feet just making that decision.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just want to see like how many you could get through. I feel like, dude, this is a 10x developer. He submitted 200. Solve problems.
So do you feel, so obviously that's like annoying just because it's a lot of work. Do you feel like it's something you're capable of doing? Like just experience wise, like do you have the formal experience to be able to define and articulate big O notation and choose the optimal data structure and that kind of stuff?
I like have a pretty good grasp on, you know, time complexity, space complexity, why you would use like a map over a list of things. But sometimes, especially when coding live, you know, you can just get tripped up on stuff where it's like, I'm just blanking and I'm forgetting like that last exit case that like makes everything fall in line, you know?
Yep. And did you, I'll come to you next, Jacob, but Brad, did you have, I forget, do you have a computer science degree?
No, I'm an electrical engineer.
That's what I thought. Okay. So have you ever had any formal education around data structures and algorithms?
I took one class on it in college and I don't even know if we implemented any of them. I think it was mostly just like theory.
Cool. Yeah. By the way, welcome Pixie on YouTube, Mark and Matthew on Twitch. What's going on, everyone? Matthew said just finished up wrapped up some refactoring. I'd love to know more details. What's the project? What language? Whatever you want to share. I think that'd be neat. We are just chatting. We're going to start our official episode of the podcast in a few minutes, but this is kind of our intro, warm-up, convo topic. And I was asking about just general experience that we all have about data structures and algorithms. And Brad shared a little bit about his experience. And then I was going to go to Jacob next. So I guess first question, do you have a formal computer science degree?
That's a difficult question because, to be honest, my university is not technical one.
Okay.
It's more like a business one. So even though I was studying something what was called business IT, it still wasn't like computer science. It was more like usage of IT in the modern business. So it's not like fully computer science, but some sort of computer science. So it was more related to databases, to business analysis, stuff like that. A bit of data science, but not as much computer science. So I haven't even got a single lecture about algorithms or data structures. So I can't really say that it was from my studies. More I learned throughout like learning on my own. But still, I believe that the algorithm is just a fancy word for saying to someone who is not
Solve a
technical
problem.
I invented this algorithm, so we don't want to share the source code, but we just want to name it the way that it sounds interesting for the reader or
I feel like half the time, like they're not asking you to like perform an algorithm you would have learned in school necessarily, like a binary search or a depth first search or whatever. I think more often than not, those data structures and algorithms questions are normally just like solve some problem that requires a little bit of recursion or, you know, critical thinking.
Yeah, it's the reason this is top of mind for me. I did last Thursday in our like community open hour chat thing in Discord. I was like, let's do beginner JavaScript stuff. And then I don't know if I pushed us in this direction, but we ended up going to like time complexity, like big O notation. And I just kind of did like, they're commenting on the screens. I was like, what are the 4 squares? But it's the number of screens because we have 4 people here. Now I get it. Thanks, chat. So I started kind of talking about this stuff and really enjoyed it. And I have a formal CS degree. So I've taken both data structures and algorithms. And I'm definitely not super, super good or intelligent about these things. But I know like pretty solid intermediate stuff. So anyway, I was just kind of winging it. And then it seemed like people really enjoyed it. And then I was like, what do y'all think about doing this again next week, which was yesterday. And so we did not necessarily a part 2 in terms of like it was a natural progression, because this is me just making up teaching on the spot, and really, really enjoyed it. And I'm thinking like I've kind of thought about this before, but I want to kind of take that idea into more of a formal like data structures and algorithms for JavaScript developers, because it's often one of those things that doesn't get actual attention. And then you potentially get like limited in the types of interviews that you can be successful in because you've never like actually spent dedicated time on those topics. And they can be, not all the time, but they can be really important for certain types of interviews. So anyway, I was thinking about doing more of that stuff and posted on Twitter about that. And everybody was like, yes, please do it. So that's something that's kind of
like you have a URL
kind of top of mind. I have a URL?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You have a URL for it unless you decide to do something else with it.
Oh, that's a different thing. That's JS challenges.
Oh, it still apply.
Yes, it could. Yes, it could. There's also, I won't say it out loud, but I want to search to see if it's available now.
In your head.
This one, the one I just looked at is not available. So I guess I can say is dsa.dev. So data structures and algorithms .dev. But I also thought about.
Better be careful. Buy it now.
I know. I'm not going to say this one out loud in case I want to. What? That one's not available either? Terrible. Anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely value in like teaching that stuff. I think it's really good, like fundamentals of programming concepts, but I'm here to raise the flag that says like, I just don't think it plays any part in very specifically front end interviews. Like never in my life have I really had to do anything that tricky, you know, writing real application code.
I don't know how to do it. I'll own it.
Yeah.
Then okay.
I don't know how to do it. I did do like some weird bubble sort thing in college. Don't remember how to do that.
Yep.
And I've never been on a project where it's been an issue.
Yep.
So Amy, if that's the case, how do you handle interviewing when, you know, that step number 1, that first step is like,
do it for an interview.
Do this? Because that makes me so mad, you know, when I get asked that. How you just find opportunities that don't require that or that know your background? Or
I was going to say, yeah. So some of it is like the opportunities that I've interviewed for or talked to. So like if I'm interviewing for director of design, not a problem. You know, I did have.
What about if you're interviewing for Redwood.js core team?
That relationship, you know, a lot
#
of the
networking.
serious conversations I've had with people or job offers have been out of my existing network. The other thing is I did interview for not really interview. It was like an initial conversation of interest for a director of front end position. And then it's more of like, let's talk about relationships or how you lead people or that kind of thing. I'm not actually having to do the work and write those algorithms or logarithms.
Either one, either / both. Yeah, I did like all of my none of my Microsoft interviews were that technical. I never had like whiteboarding stuff with Microsoft. I never had whiteboarding stuff with another company in Nashville, Shurion, that I interviewed with, and they like really liked me personality wise. And then I bombed the interviews. It was like object-oriented programming questions, and I didn't do college correctly in terms of like learning computer science. I got good grades, but anyway, so outside of my Google interviews and one that I did before I went to Auth0 for a local company, I've really rarely ever had whiteboarding stuff. But I think to your point, like it's not super practical. Like someone commented bubble sort, how many times have you written it? You just don't, right? Like you use built-in sort algorithms to a language because they're there and they've already been optimized. So we don't need to like redo all of that logic ourselves. It doesn't make sense. But I do think there are times where like even occasionally on front end where like you can make intentional decisions about how you store data. Front end, most likely it doesn't have a significant impact on your, like whether you store something in an array versus a map. It's probably not going to matter that much because you don't have that much data on the front end. Again, if you get to a situation where it matters, then you can go do research, right? And you can go figure out like, hey, ChatGPT or Teammate, why is this running slow? And we can have a learning opportunity from that. So it's not the most practical all the time, but I do think it's like, it can be helpful just to have some of that background knowledge of the actual science behind computers.
I really feel for juniors right now that are, or especially like the people that are trying to break into the industry and get their first job in tech, because, I've had instances where like, if you're trying to submit your resume, I don't even have like, I feel like the resume that would get that email back, Brad, that you're talking about, to say, hey, take this test, because I don't have a Fang. I don't have an Adobe. I don't have a Jira or any of those things on my resume. But there's other things, other skills that I feel like I bring to the table that might even be more valuable. But just because the system is the way that it is, I can't even get in the door. It's like whatever computer they have running on my resume, it's like, this isn't, we can find somebody better or with more experience.
Yeah, I almost feel like my resume is tailored to the bigger companies who do those types of interviews. So I'm almost getting funneled into like the step 0 data structures and algorithms type process.
Well, and it does raise a question too, like how often is this just an automated process to weed everybody out to get you to have the conversation? And I don't know.
They didn't even think twice before they were like, here's the link to the HackerRank test, go.
Yeah. And the question too is that the way that it's always been, or right now, just because there's so many people in tech, is that the easiest way to weed people out?
Well, it's getting less effective. Like I said, I could probably put the prompt verbatim into ChatGPT and get a working solution. So like that weed out step is no longer going to be relevant whatsoever.
Yep.
I'll put the hot take, and then we'll actually like, I was just thinking we should have,
we need to clip this because this is a good bonus. Yeah.
Well, I also think this, just us sitting on a panel and chatting, I think this is valuable content too, because I get attached to like personalities and like hearing people's perspectives, and like just this I think is super fun. Jacob, we also haven't let you talk as much so far, so we're going to move into like the focus is on you in a second. But I think my hot take, and this kind of combines some of what Brad said but directly related to what Amy said, at this point in my career, and I also acknowledge like I'm in a pretty good place in my career, I don't give a shit about my resume. I haven't even touched my resume in years, and the reason is I didn't need a resume for my last job. I didn't need a resume. I might have had a resume for the previous thing. If I were to interview for someone now, it's not because of my resume. It's because of networking and like having been in public and shared my knowledge, and kind of those things are just obvious. And again, like I'm in a different situation than a lot. I'm in a privileged position to have the audience and the exposure that I've gotten. But Amy, to your point, like opportunities for me are going to come from relationships and having proved myself in different ways, not just words on a piece of paper or like a digital piece of paper.
We need to bring Taylor in on this conversation.
Yeah.
Because I know he has a few thoughts.
I was going to see if I have time while I'm in Nashville. I was going to text you and Taylor to see if you wanted to get together for coffee.
Yes.
Yes. Automated resume gates can definitely hurt juniors. Alternative might be an untenable. Yeah, there's definitely like, I think it's easy for us to complain about resumes getting automatically rejected. But it's also just not feasible a lot of times for people to look through 500 or 1,000 resumes. So there's not a perfect situation. Obviously, like we could avoid the automated part of that, ideal, but there's still a time limit of how much time people can spend reading them. I think that just goes to show, especially in those situations where you have to play the game, and the game is include keywords on your resume, and you have to tailor that to make it through those situations to get the opportunity to just show who you are and your knowledge in an interview. Like that's where then it becomes about you. Almost everything up until being in the interview is like playing the game to get to the interview.
The last time I had to submit my resume, so my resume is designed
Obviously.
here, you know. Well, and there's tons of services out there that you can go to and get like a designed resume template. And when I first started looking for jobs, it was like, make sure your resume looks good because that's your first impression, make it stand out. But what's interesting is they can't use that in like your automated situations. Like the OCR can't always find the information that it needs. So I had to resubmit a resume that was just plain Jane text, but ugly for that reason, that they needed to send it through their reader.
Absolutely. Which like, especially as a designer, like in your shoes, but even in mine, I would feel so shitty about like having this really beautiful thing and then having to like downgrade so that I can submit something that is going to be able to pick up keywords easier. But like, it's all a game that you can play to get into the room.
Okay, so James, I give you veto power over this question.
Veto.
Because it could go down another rabbit hole. What was interesting was with the resume, they said, spend all of your time as a designer focusing on your portfolio. Make your resume plain Jane, and then link off to your portfolio and use that as an opportunity to show everything off. Which the question becomes, that makes sense as a designer, as a developer, do you need that same thing to send to somebody? Do you need a portfolio of all your code? Does your GitHub need to be perfect in those situations?
I will not veto. I will defer first to Jacob.
Perfect.
So like part of this conversation is open source, and like you have things that are built in public. What are your thoughts on that, of like the importance of your portfolio as a developer when you potentially look for new opportunities in the future?
So I would say that it is important, but to be honest, from my own experience, that wasn't like a crucial thing. It was more like an addition, like nice to have. That, for example, an employer looked at my profile and decided, oh, this guy is doing some nice open source things. I'm not sure if he looked at the code, hopefully not. But just the fact that I was contributing to open source and giving back to what I was using on my daily basis, I think this makes more sense in terms of the personality of the person that they are employing. So if they are looking for someone who can not just take but also give, because if you are an open sourcer, I will call it like this, you sometimes not as a developer, at least this is my experience. Of course, maybe there are other cases. However, I noticed that if you are an open sourcer or maintainer, sorry.
Oh, maybe it's just me. Jacob, you were cutting out occasionally, but maybe it's just me. Is it not cutting out for you too? Oh, then I'll just be quiet. Continue.
Is it your wired headphones?
It might be. I apologize.
Wired headphones don't have any problems. Remember.
I know. They're perfect, Amy.
It's a joke, yeah.
So I would say that the person that is contributing to open source, I think, is more willingly or willingness to basically take more ownership of the stuff. This is what I experience. That even if you contribute to open source and working in your company in an enterprise project, because of your experience with open source, where you are giving back to the community, what you previously was using a lot, because I'm pretty certain that all of us are using a lot of open source. So because of that, you are capable to have bigger ownership, and maybe that's why companies and employers might be looking for your profile. This is my experience, that when I was doing some interviews, the employers were usually referring to my GitHub in terms of how, let's say, self-sufficient I am, how much I can do on my own without any guidance. So I would say, companies or employers might be looking at that. However, in terms of the previous discussion that you were having about the juniors, this is something that we had recently in Poland, and we have, I think, right now, and we will have for a few years, which is the fact that we basically don't have programming or developer offers for juniors. Like for interns, for sure. For juniors, we might have few of them, like across the whole country. And it is because there were a lot of those code camps, like, those courses where you can just pay, 10,000 euros to switch your career and start, having a great life and stuff like that. All those promises. And because of that, a lot of people were like intrigued by it. Why shouldn't I try it? And even some of my friends decided that this is a good opportunity. So they spent a lot of money for the course where there was a guarantee to get a job in IT. So those companies, after doing the course, they stopped contacting you, and you wasn't able to contact them. Like there was no contact from the site, even though there was like this
promise of
full guarantee of being employed after.
Wow.
So imagine spending 10,000 euros on a course and just not getting anything out of it. Because the course was 1 month and you basically know how to build a portfolio in HTML.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, there's so many good opportunities, good boot camps, good courses, but it also has opened up the door for scams for people that are just looking to earn money and not care about the people that are going through the curriculum.
Do you want to start?
I was going to say that, yeah. I still I think this would be a good idea though for us to chat.
I'll tell Ashley to clip this as a bonus episode because you can in Simplecast you can mark it as a bonus.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good idea. Sweet. All right, I will start us off. By the way, people hanging out watching, hello, welcome. If you're here, let us know where you're listening from, and maybe we ought to have a prompt language for the audience too on any given basis. Like, what's your favorite framework if you do front-end development? Let us know in the chat, and I'll go ahead and.
What would be cool is if we had a map where we could track where people are coming in.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah. It's funny. I was on the data structures mindset, and you said map. And I was like, a map. All right.
Chicago.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design with a little bit of zest. In this episode, we're going to talk about headless commerce with open source.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compressed.
What's up, everyone? My name is James Q. Quick, and I am a JavaScript developer, speaker, and teacher. I changed it up. Anyone catch that?
Ooh.
Hey, y'all.
Go for it.
See, Brad paid attention to the order.
I did.
Amy.
I did. You said the order.
No, there was an order. I wasn't paying attention.
Amy doesn't listen.
Where's my headphones working?
Hey, y'all. I'm Brad Garapi. I work at Atlassian on the Confluence reliability team.
Making sure there wasn't more.
Amy.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood.js core team.
Amazing. The editing probably makes those intros sound much better than they were.
Thank you,
So
Ashley.
Here we are. And yes, thank you, Ashley. So we're here to talk about headless commerce with open source. So we have Jacob on as our guest. Jacob, do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me first. Forgive me, but I won't be saying my last name because it's quite difficult to pronounce from anyone apart from Poland. So I will just say Jacob Andrzejewski. This is also how you can find me on Twitter if you like. So I work at Storefront as senior full stack developer. So I do something what I would say a real full stack development because I am doing stuff from CSS to actual cloud. So from writing Tailwind styles into deploying applications on cloud. So I would say like this is a full stack, right? So yeah, if you don't know Storefront is a headless commerce platform for many e-commerce platforms. So basically, if you have built your e-commerce with platforms such as Magento, Shopify, Commerce Tools, BigCommerce, or any other, Storefront will help you build a very performant e-commerce, like the storefront part.
Sweet. Spoiler alert. I used to work on Magento back at Adobe.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Like to see our Magento integration then.
I'm curious to hear, like how this Vue storefront plays with like existing e-commerce platforms. Is it something that sits in front of them and uses them headlessly, or does Vue storefront also have its own backend as well?
So should I say it right now or afterwards? This is what I missed.
Oh, let's hop in. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so in the current architecture, how Vue Storefront works, it is mainly a front end. However, it also contains something in between the storefront and the e-commerce platform. So you have something what we named SDK, which is basically an express middleware that acts in between, so that you have only one server that you are using to connect to several different third-party services. So if you have e-commerce, like for example, BigCommerce, and you have, for example, CMS like Storyblok, Contentful, in Vue Storefront, what you will do is you will just send the request to this SDK, and then it will send the request to the correct service, which gives you more flexibility in terms of data orchestration and also in terms of the observability, because basically you have this one source of truth in terms of connecting to data. But the main part is the storefront. So we have this UI library, which is called Storefront UI, which works with both React and Vue. This is our recent addition. Kind of interesting because we are named Vue Storefront.
Yep.
However, this was our recent development. So we also have a storefront on React as well, in Next.js. So I wouldn't say that it is a pure front end. This is for sure not another e-commerce platform. It's more like the storefront and this SDK middleware, like in between storefront and the e-commerce platform, that helps you manage all those requests in one place. It is also good for analytics, because then you see all the requests that are coming from through your application, and you can add Google Analytics or any other source of monitoring tool just to see how your application behaves.
Sweet. So I take it like this storefront is kind of like like it starts out as a template that has everything you might want, like probably checkout or cart or, all these things like that built right in. But obviously one of the big things that stores want to do is like customize. What kind of like hooks do you guys have in there for theming and customization?
So in the previous version of Vue Storefront, the initial one that we were using, and which was basically as a base of how Vue Storefront was built, we had this templating over packages. So basically the whole front end was a template. It was a GitHub repository. So users who would want to try Vue Storefront, they needed to clone the repository, start the project. And as you might guess, it wasn't really good idea, because then updating the packages or updating the code basically required the users to do those changes by themselves. So then we had this idea of creating packages almost out of everything. So that's why we allow the users to just bump the package. So if there is a bug fix or a new feature, they just need to bump the package to the new version. But it also comes with some issues. If you have a source code which is packed in a package, you can't really easily customize it. You can fork it, you can create your local copy, but then if you will bump the version, then you will have issues. So what we came up right now with this new architecture of Vue Storefront is that we are giving to the customers and to the users the building blocks. So it somehow, in some way, it is still a package, but it's, I would say, the best of both worlds. So we have both the template and the packages. So we have those reusable stuff in the packages, the stuff that is not as modified, as frequently modified. And for those stuff that we already knew that it's no point in creating, let's say, component package out of them, we decided to just give to the community and to the users the building blocks and the educational content that would allow them to just use those blocks and build with them what they really want. So we are trying it out, and even right now we see that the feedback is really good in terms of this new approach. So I would say that we have come through a long road to get there, with a lot of obviously not so good feedback, because users want to have the best flexibility, the safety of pumping the package and not having any breaking changes. So we come from long road, and it's also good for us because we had this opportunity to learn through this architecture. And right now, I think we have the solution that works basically the best. So if you have tried stuff like Headless UI, for example, you will see similarities, because Storefront UI was based hugely on Headless UI, but it's purely for the storefronts, so e-commerce.
Yeah, you were like going right down the path that I was going to go down. I was going to say, you see this kind of decomposability in component libraries a lot now, where they separate the templating portion, or like the actual UI portion, from the logic portion. So like Adobe has some really cool libraries around this, called like React Aria and React Spectrum. And one is like particularly just the view components, and one is particularly the logic components. So if you want to have a button, they have a button component to make it look like a button. Or you can use this hook in React called use button, and it's like all of the state and logic that a button might ever need, so that you can then just apply that to, whatever UI you want to put in front of that. And almost it's like whatever works best for Vue Storefront, the company, to build internally, also kind of feels best for the customer. Like, I'm sure you guys use a lot of your own building blocks, and therefore the customer would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we have built this library, and what I really liked about this headless UI approach as well is that you can even just get the components themselves without any styling at all. And this is something what I really enjoy, because it just works. It doesn't look nice. You have to take care of the, let's say, UI part, but it works. So you have all those stuff that you mentioned. So for example, support for accessibility, all those handlers for the events, error handlers, for example. So what will happen if there will be some kind of error? So you have the logic, have the, let's say, template, but it's not styled. So usually users will develop those kind of things in a similar way. So you probably develop like a lot of buttons, so you know that there is this similar pattern across all of them that could be, let's say, stored in a reusable function. However, styling is usually something completely different, because you have different branding, different theming, different focus effects, stuff like that. So this is what really differs from one component to another.
I saw you posted an article recently on dev.to called Component Libraries, Should You Use Them? So I'm curious, like, your take on it. I really enjoyed reading the post, and I'll include a link in the description. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. This is something that I started doing recently, which are basically the articles that are not tutorials. They are more sharing what I learned throughout the years and my experience with certain tools. So the inspiration for this article was actually my experience with Vuetify. this library, which, to say frankly, is not the best. But it's not that the library is bad. It's just that it was used in a wrong way, I would say. So if you are looking at those kind of component libraries, those generic ones, so the ones that have buttons, labels, forms, stuff like that, they usually have a different, for example, design system, but they don't really differ in terms of the functionality. They work kind of similar. So those kind of components, they usually, the authors of those component libraries, they usually aim to make them most flexible ever, like to have 1000 props or 1000 slots just to allow users to utilize it in any possible scenario. And then I will tell you, you will have a scenario that wasn't covered, and you have to find some sort of workaround. And sometimes those workarounds are really, really time consuming, and they are really a pain in your developer soul. So that is why I've come up with this idea that those tools should be used in a certain way for certain problems, to solve certain problems. So I would completely use Vuetify for a proof of concept or like MVP of an application that I want to build next. Why? Because it gives me those components out of the box. They are already styled, so I just need to put them in the application, like create Vue 3 with Vite application and just add a plugin for Vuetify. And then I can just drop those components on my page. They have support for multiple screens, so they are responsive out of the box. For those kind of scenarios, I would say component libraries works best. For those stages where you don't need actually that much logic or that much customizability. However, if you are building a production-ready application with a team of, let's say, 5+ developers, and you aim this application to be for the enterprises, let's say, I assure you that you will run into issues with the cases that weren't covered by the package author. And I'm not saying that you should, let's say, blame it on the author. For sure not. He was just doing his best. He or she, obviously, was just doing their best. The problem is that this tool is then used in a wrong way. So I would say, as I mentioned, use Vuetify, for example, for an MVP stage or proof of concept. Try your idea, see if it makes sense, maybe show it to certain users. They will say, okay, this looks nice. We would really appreciate having such application. And then dedicate some time to actually rethink the architecture. Because this is something what companies don't really do, is they create an MVP and go into production with it. And they don't have the time to rethink the architecture. And obviously, you can say, okay, what can be the architecture on the front end? But I can assure you there can be as well architecture on the front end. It's not only on the back end. Architecture can also be implemented or, let's say, designed on the front end, specifically for the applications that are widely used and widely, let's say, reused. So, for example, if you have an e-commerce and you have, let's say, stores for different regions or stores that are using the same database, but they are, for example, themed in a different way, you have to design it in a proper way, because otherwise you will be just handling a code base that just doesn't make any sense, and you just have to pretend that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I feel like the usage of component libraries like you're talking about is one of those bell curves where you start out and it's really easy to pick up and use, so you use them. Then you get to like this midpoint where you outgrow them and you have to start either making your own custom components or building your own component library from scratch. But then you get to the bottom of the bell curve, the upper echelon, the very, very, very large companies, and I take my experience from Atlassian and Adobe, where they fall back to a component library because you have so many people, you have to get them all on the same page. And the only way to do that is to like truly dedicate a full team or two to maintaining these component libraries. Number one, to keep your branding consistent, but number two, just to ease the speed of development. When you have 10,000 developers, they all need to be speaking the same language and cranking out products and components as fast as possible. And so a lot of ways, the only way to do this is to just provide those packages to people. And going back, talking about, open source contribution, showing like ownership, what you will see when you reach that level of scale is a lot of times your component design system might not have something you need. So you either contribute to it, or there's a separate ecosystem that develops around the base level component library that normally has like some kind of special name like Forge or Quarry, because now it's a collection of new components that are built on top of these smaller components to enable more advanced features. And sometimes they're product specific, sometimes they're, company wide, but you'll see all sorts of interesting new repos come up that are using those component libraries as a base system. So it kind of depends on like where you're at in scale. And I totally agree that like for the most part, if you've got, a medium-sized development team, the best way to go is something headless, something unstyled, where you can take that level of control and you're not trying to, build 10 products with one set of components.
I'm going to take a little bit different direction. So like Vue Storefront kind of jokes about like the specific name of Vue, and then also now including React, which I feel like eventually for any product that gets a lot of adoption, like including React support probably makes sense. But this is more of a personal question. Jacob, what is your favorite framework, library, whatever you want to call it? Is it Vue? Is it not? And why? Like, what are the things that you like about it?
So I joined the company when it was also named Vue Storefront. However, back then it was only Vue.
Yeah.
So I guess you know the reason. It's because of the Vue.
Yeah.
I started my development career learning and also working as in React. However, then there were many opportunities in my city to work on Vue.js. So when I started learning it, I decided, okay, this is the approach that it's a bit closer to me, to how I want to build applications. And then I found out about Next, which is like right now my top one in terms of how I want to build my new applications. In terms of the community, in terms of the amount of features that you have out of the box. So I would say this prime framework is Vue. And I think it will always be, even though there are many interesting alternatives like Svelte, like Astro, like Remix. I don't even remember all of them because it's like raining with frameworks every day. So, but I would say that the Vue ecosystem is just the closest to how I want to build applications. It was the easiest for me to learn and the easiest for me to progress throughout my career as well. So
yeah, Vue comes with some opinions, which is really nice in a lot of cases. Is there any talk about supporting additional frameworks at Vue Storefront? And then additionally, like I would love to hear about the process of like modifying the product and the code to also work with React. Is it an adapter situation, or was it like a rewrite, or a totally new repo?
So it was actually a new repo, purely because in terms of the architecture, because I mentioned at the beginning that we are using this Storefront UI, which is the component library which works similar to Headless UI.
Mm-hmm.
However, it wasn't always like this, because back when there was like the initial version of Vue Storefront, we also had the same Storefront UI, but then it was on Vue 2, Vue.js 2.0 version, which is until the end of this year, it will be like out of life, end of life version. So you understood why we had to migrate to Vue 3. So we had to make several decisions on building the new version of this UI library. One was for sure to migrate to Vue 3 to have still the support. And the second one was to actually get rid of how we work with CSS, because back then we were using Sass as the, let's say, main styling for the library. So we did another decision to go with Tailwind CSS, which I would say that it is right now a very safe bet. And the other decision, like the last one, was should we actually support any other framework? Because if you are taking a look at this middleware part, which is just an Express application, which was also created a few months ago, or maybe a year ago, but not later than that. This is like Node.js. So it can connect to React, Vue, Next, Svelte, whatever you want. So then we decided that we can use those frameworks to create those storefronts. So we have Next, stuff like that. But in the end, you have this library, like the UI library, UI components library. So how many of them do we want to support? How many people we can put there to support and build new components? Because if you develop, let's say, a product card, the component, you have to develop it both in React and in Vue nowadays with how the Storefront UI is built. So you have to basically do the same work twice, but in a different framework. So the repo was, let's say, another repo. Then it was merged to the previous one as a new branch, as the new main. And the architecture was like completely different. So there was no way to make it work, purely because Vue 2 is not compatible with Vue 3. So even if you manage to make it work for React part, Vue 3 would still suffer from that. So the only solution here was to create a new project and start from scratch with the new ideas, with fresh head, I would say, in terms of the experiences we got from the customers, from the users, from community. And based on that, there is this new Storefront UI, which basically supports both Vue and React. And if you're really interested, we have some videos on YouTube. Serhi and Rick, they are showing both, let's say, parts. So both React and Vue, how you can build almost the same looking website, but with different frameworks, but using the same components, but with different structure, different syntax.
Yeah, I saw the YouTube channel. I know you have one as well. Talk a little bit about like what motivated you to get into sharing on YouTube, and did you find any were you like anxious about being on camera, or was it tough for you to publish something, out to the world like that?
So I started my YouTube channel, but I'm not aiming for channels such as James, for sure not. This is my part-time where I'm just doing it for fun. Creating of this channel was purely related to other channels as well. So I decided that I really enjoy sharing what I learned. So sharing tutorials, sharing my knowledge, sharing some patterns, and my talks as well. So I decided that I will try to get all those channels. So video, which is YouTube, written version, which is Dev2. I tried also with Hashnote, but it didn't work quite well for me. So maybe you have better experiences with that, but for me, Dev2 works like a charm. So the motivation to go for YouTube was purely to have another channel where I could share basically similar content, but in a visual way. So I read an article from I forgot his name. I will probably James Langsdorff.
Jason Langsdorff.
Jason Langsdorff.
Jason,
Yep.
yeah. Sorry, apologize, Jason. So I read an article from him where he wrote about. I will let's say paraphrase it, but it was about designing a content strategy where you have an idea what you want to share with your community, and then you create those different sources or different content types for different channels. So you have an idea that you want to build an application with, let's say, this technology and this technology. So then you record a video about it, you create an open source project on GitHub, you write an article, and you give a talk about it. So thanks to that, you have one idea which gave you four basically for content types. Oh, that's better. So based on that, I decided to do something similar. However, I'm not as good in terms of video editing. So my videos are usually like one take. So I'm not seeing it like a future. It's more like another channel where I can just share the similar content or maybe something completely different. And that's the general idea.
I saw that article. Were you going to talk about
Jason's
that
article.
Yeah, so where he calls it the buffalo stick. So I shared a link in the chat, but it's the idea of like taking every single piece of the buffalo and using it.
Yeah. Which is tough. I like kind of preach that a lot, but I also don't do near as much of that myself. And honestly, like I'm still not working very much just because of baby, but I also have not published like any shorts on YouTube or videos on TikTok. And I really like the idea of doing that, but I feel like I'm, especially with limited time, like I'm just not able to do the things in as many places that as I would like to in an impactful way. Because you just have to be so consistent and you have to like really nail the platform that I'm trying to narrow like my scope more and more, which is very tough to do. But if you can find like that niche, and Jason mentioned, or Jacob, you mentioned Jason mentioning a few specific things, like if you build a product and you give a talk about it, that's kind of the dream of like, if you really have that content focus for a period of time and create everything you do around that and really use every part of that buffalo, like that's where you get a lot of the value out of. That's something I'm going to be working on figuring out starting in like September or so to give myself a 6-month focus and really dive deep into building something and creating content around it.
Yeah, because you can almost view it as like that is your marketing channel for what you're building, you know?
Yeah.
Jacob, I feel you on the one take videos. I do not like editing. I think it takes too long. I try to keep mine very short, 10 minutes or less. And recently I've been getting into doing these like little, almost 1 minute opinion pieces that I post to Twitter where it's like, hey, I used this thing and here's what I thought about it. Or, hey, I had this interview experience and here's what I thought about it or whatnot. And I think as we grow in our careers, you know, you start out with the nuts and bolts and the foundations and how to do things. But as you gain more experience, you think about those experiences and you have thoughts and opinions on them. And then you think about process and people and technology and just what you have to say expands in a way that's not just looking at a code editor anymore. It turns into a lot of thought processes and things like that. So I think it's a good natural progression to go on and just get up there and say what you think, because I think sharing it is most important.
But I would say that there is something tough for sure for the beginners, and I experienced it with some of my friends, even from Storefront, from my current company, where they said that they don't really want to share anything because they don't feel that they have the knowledge to do it. So I would say that this is kind of interesting topic, because you don't have to know everything to share something. Obviously, you will have probably some wrong opinions about certain topics, but I'm pretty certain that like majority of all of us developers have something interesting to share. but we are just too shy to share it. Just we are shy, and we are afraid that someone will come to us and say, hey, you did it wrong. You made a mistake. That is not a correct way. And that is why people are so afraid to share, I would say. Because if you take a look at it from the perspective of me, for example, I'm quite young, and this is sometimes an issue for people, because they don't perceive me as someone who is like a guru in something. And for sure they are like correct. I'm not a guru in almost anything, purely because I haven't spent years on that. However, it's not only that you have to be a guru to share something, because there will be people who have better and bigger knowledge than you. There will be people who have equal knowledge than you, and for sure there will be people who have the knowledge that is, let's say, lower than you, so they don't have experience with that, and with something else. So there is always a thing that you can share, and you might encounter a community or an audience that will be really bad, and we decide that they expected like super premium, top advanced content, and they just got stuff like what I'm sharing, so my opinions on component libraries, and they expected some advanced like architecture design patterns for micro frontends. So they won't get it there, because basically I don't feel experience in that topic, because I haven't built an application on micro frontends. So I don't share knowledge about that, but I share knowledge about stuff that I do every day, and some things that I like and some things that I don't like. So I would say that this is quite a huge issue that I think we as content creators, some of us work in big companies. Some are just like full-time content creators. But for what I learned from my experience is that I want to push those guys for example, from my company to just share, because some of them have a lot of knowledge, more than me, but they are just shy to share.
I know we have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
No, you go.
We have so many opinions about exactly what you're talking about. I know between, the four of us, but a huge part of that is you don't, as you were saying, you don't have to know everything. And there's even a parable about this teacher that was like the best teacher, and somebody asked at the end of the semester, like, "What's your secret?" And they said, "I didn't know any of the content." The professor said, "I didn't know any of the content at the beginning of the semester. I was just studying the day before and turning around and teaching the class what I learned that night." So I think that people forget that you just have to be one step ahead. You don't have to know absolutely everything. And it's that teaching that solidifies that knowledge, which is the whole premise that James has of the Learn, Build, Teach Discord server.
Bring it full circle. Yeah, it's so like I started my career at 22 giving talks to developers that have been writing code as long as I'd been alive, basically, which is a very intimidating thing. And like obviously that was tough for a while, but then I realized like I don't have to know more than them. I just have to know something different than they know. So even though they had done X, Y, and Z for 20 years, they hadn't done the thing that I was presenting on. So I still had something to offer. And at like 23, I went in and did like workshops teaching people, like a group of developers at American Express. And I was such a not good developer at that point, but I knew something that they didn't, and I was able to teach that thing. And yeah, the more we can all encourage people to share, I think the better off we'll be, because there is so much that people have to offer, and hopefully they find the space and spaces to feel comfortable enough to share that stuff.
I think the next excuse that you'll hear is, well, there's already been 10 blog posts on this
that topic. Yeah.
But the thing is, you have a unique perspective and unique experiences to bring to that, and it's still valuable and worth sharing.
100%.
I actually heard a really good characterization of like what you should be doing on social media, or like when you share. Your goal isn't to like attract everybody and gain more followers. Your goal is to find a group of people who identify with you, jive with you, click with you, support you, teach you, whatever. Like you have to find your people. That's the goal. And if it's only 500 of those people, that's more valuable than having, 100,000 people who just don't care, because then you just get, the comment section chirping, and that's not what you're looking for.
I have
Unless that is what you're looking for. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I have one last story in terms of sharing.
Yeah.
That I wanted to also share with you. The quite recent one, because on Tuesday, actually, I started being a mentor in my university, the university
Nice.
that I studied in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because I was also part of the same program, but as a mentee. I'm not sure if that's correct. The person who is being like taught by someone more advanced and more experienced. So I applied to my university saying, okay, if you consider me as someone experienced and who can share the knowledge with the students, I will be completely into that. Just give me drop me a note. And they reached me and they said, yeah, we are actually looking for younger people, and especially the people who basically just finished the same course or the same program. So on Tuesday, we started it with a little bit of an introduction where both the students and the mentors were in the same room, and they were just discussing a lot of topics. And first of all, there was this introduction where every mentor was introducing himself, so what or herself. So what you do, what is your name, who is your mentee, stuff like that. And the funny thing is that almost everyone missed me, which was like obvious because first of all, I'm young, and second of all, I look very young. So because of that, they missed me, apart from one person who was like the organizer. So this guy knew that I'm a mentor. And it was really interesting for me to be there because other mentors, there were people, 50 or more years old with 30 years of experience. They built 5 companies and they are angel investors. They are head of IT or stuff like that. And there is me, where I say, okay, guys, last year I finished the same program as a mentee and now I'm a mentor. And it was really encouraging for me because I expected some kind of, maybe not a hate, but or negative emotions, more like, this guy seems too young to be doing this. Like, look at us. We are experienced. We are older. So he shouldn't be there. But the feedback was actually very positive because we have found a common language, even though both the age difference and the experience difference was so huge. But what was joining us was the willingness to share. And it didn't matter how experienced I am. It's just the fact that I want to share what I learned. And for sure, even though I graduated last year, I have some experience in IT, in business and stuff like that, which I can share. And this is what matters. It's not how many years or how old you are. It's just that the fact that you share with the different people the same idea of sharing. Sharing is caring, right?
So cool. There's so many good things in that, especially like one of the things that you left in your original comments was a comment about you being young, and I don't know exact age and it doesn't really matter, but it is interesting to be able to flip that around within a year's time and now go from mentee to mentor because you've been through that process. And now, like, if anyone goes to your Twitter profile, you can see a list of accolades of like places that you worked, technologies that you worked with, GDE, like that kind of stuff. I think kind of really speaks for itself. And the last thing I'll end with, and I'll lead us into picks and plugs, is the idea that like number of years of experience isn't directly proportional to knowledge and overall experience. Like you could be a developer for 15 years and only do the same thing for 15 years and not be getting better and not be expanding your knowledge and not be learning more about the ecosystem and different things and strategies and that sort of stuff. So that's one reason to encourage people. Don't let like number of years of doing a job think that's necessarily a direct correlation to how much you know, because it's not necessarily the case. And going back to the earlier point about knowing your audience, you could have a short amount of experience, but know more than the potential audience that you're going to talk to. So I love that you were able to hit on all of those, and we can kind of leave it at like sharing is caring and finding that safe place to do so. I love that. Do we want to move into our picks and plugs section? That's the last section of the podcast. It's where we pick something that we enjoy, that we watched, read, bought on Amazon, used, whatever it is, and then something we want to plug ourselves. And I can go first if y'all are okay with that. I am going to pick a TV show called Grey's Anatomy.
What?
I don't know if I may have picked it before.
You're 20 years late.
No, so I started watching Grey's in college because it was Jess. I was like, I'll watch episode 1, and then like stayed up all night and watched the first season. And she's got more time on her hands now, not working. And I've been watching it with her, although she is moving very fast through Grey's. Anyway, we're like, I don't know when we started, like a month before the baby was born, and she's probably like currently on starting season 15. But it just reminded me like how much I love that show. Like it is very dramatic, but it just feels like you're able to see the evolution of people and groups and relationships in this hospital in a very, again, it's overly dramatic sometimes, but it just feels natural. Like it feels real. So it has solidified itself in like top 3 TV shows for me of all time. So check out Grey's Anatomy. I know. Yeah.
So Scrubs or Grey's?
So Scrubs, New Girls, and New Girl. Sorry. I was debating about that. Scrubs, New Girl,
one new girl
are top for me. House is in top 5, I think. And then, yeah.
No Friends in there?
I never watched, like I have watched Friends, but I never watched it like that. So it's not, it's not one of those type of shows for me. I know.
Help you with Brad and judge you.
I know. Fair enough. Anyway, so I'm gonna plug the Learn, Build, Teach Discord, and specifically the stuff that we've been doing on Thursdays, where I've been kind of like putting my teacher hat on again and teaching some data structures and algorithm stuff. I don't know that we're going to necessarily do that every week, but I love the idea of like me just kind of going in and kind of teaching. I realize I kind of miss that interaction more so than just like creating a YouTube video to teach something. Like I love the real live interaction with like quote unquote students or just people that are learning something. So I've been enjoying that. We do lots of great stuff in the Learn, Build, Teach Discord. So you can find that at learnbuildteach.com. Who wants to go next?
I got some stuff.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to start with my pick. I recently got a Nintendo Switch. I think I picked that before. It's awesome. But I'm going to pick a game this time that me and my wife have been playing. It's a co-op game called It Takes Two. And it tells us
the co-op.
I didn't hear about this one.
It tells this cute story of like a husband and wife that are like having marital troubles, and it's like a really good like storytelling experience, but also like puts you in a lot of really fun and challenging, but also like adversarial positions in co-op. Like sometimes you're working together to do something, but sometimes you're like fighting against each other, and so it's really cool the dynamic that it's able to make as you play the game. Really cool.
That's fun.
And then my plug, there's a new social network out now. It's called Threads. I checked it out. It's pretty cool. It feels like a clean Twitter, like a cleaner Twitter, and I'm valuing that right now. So come find me on there. I think it's threads.net/@BradGarapy. So it's just my name as my handle. Because right now it's kind of hard to find like other people who are in the same space, like specifically like web devs. You know, the homepage is kind of a wreck, so we gotta like, you know, follow each other.
Unfortunately, not yet available in EU. So
yeah, I heard about that.
At least in my country. So I tried to download it, but it showed the link.
Yeah,
it's not yet available for you.
I read an article about that. It's because there you go.
There you go.
It's because it links with your Instagram account and shares data, and so it's not GDPR compliant. No.
So me and my fiance also played the It Takes Two, and I would say that it is a perfect game for couples.
It's so good. It's so
especially if you, for example, are more experienced than your other part. I will call it like this.
Yep.
So other partner, because it's the way this is like completely genius in terms of the product design, because it targets a group of people where you have one person which is more experienced and one person which is less experienced, and because of how it is designed, the game, it allows both players to enjoy the game as much as possible, because the challenges are adjusted so that, for example, one person in one challenge has to do more, I will call it technical skills, but it's more like, aiming, stuff like that, which if you haven't played that many games, you might not have that movement skills over the D-pad, over the drag D-pad. I don't know how to name it. So this is like pure genius for me, and I'm really, really waiting for the next version, because we enjoyed it a lot. Not to mention all those Easter eggs there for different games, genres, and stuff like that. It's amazing stuff.
Jacob, do you want to share? Pick some plugs?
Yeah. So for the pick, I just took it from my package. So D&D, I started doing it. Dungeons and Dragons, I started doing it at the beginning of the year, but not as a member, as a player, because I was doing it before. But this time as a game master, which is basically the storyteller behind the game. So at the very beginning, I wasn't really sure if I made it, because because I'm not such a creative person. Like, you know those friends of yours who can just throw ideas out of nothing and then create a story or something that you wouldn't come up in a years. So I am that person who can't come up with those ideas. But then I decided, why don't give it a try? Maybe I will do something interesting. So I started doing sessions, and obviously the first one were pretty raw, but with each next one, I started actually creating those stories on the go, which is the whole fun for the dungeon master, for the game master, to basically create stories out of anything. Just what comes to your mind, just try to connect the dots together. So I would say that if you haven't tried it, I completely recommend you to do that, both as a player and as a game master. This is completely different experience, especially if you're a game master and you are showing your players where they should go, and you are just laughing because you have the script and you know what will happen next, and you see them like trying to figure out what will happen. This is completely great for the game master. And also, if you haven't seen the most recent video about the movie about Dungeons and Dragons with Chris Pine, it's also really nice. Even if you are completely not into Dungeons and Dragons, it's still a very good movie. A lot of jokes. And in terms of the plug, I will select the Next.js Discord channel, purely because when I joined it, instantly I started learning many interesting things, not only related to Next. This is a really open community with no hate, with no like negative emotions. It's a lot of people who are just sharing knowledge and sharing ideas, projects, interesting projects. And the amount of open source stuff that is being built for such a framework by community is crazy. Like, you have the core team, you have people like me, like ambassadors and insiders, because these are two different terms, but it doesn't matter, because you have still hundreds of people who are building stuff, not just fixing bugs and like proposing new features. They are also building new things with your framework. They're building new modules, plugins, extending the core functionalities, trying to do very interesting things. So I would say that it's really welcoming community, and I'm really happy to be part of it. And that is why I selected it for the plug.
Love that. I've heard nothing but good things. Amy, you ready?
Awesome. Oh yeah, I was born ready. So
Okay.
Talking about sharing content, I'm going to pick the LogRocket blog. it seems like anytime I'm trying to find something and search, that always comes up as a resource. So it's fantastic. And they also have a great podcast. I know James and I were on the Log Rocket podcast, or Pod Rocket podcast, but their Log Rocket blog is fantastic. So check that out. And then I will also plug my Threads account. So my handle there is also Self-Teach Me, and I'll include a link in the chat. But Brad, you have more followers than me already.
I think I have 0, so because I literally signed up while we were talking.
What an influencer I am.
This is like the only time that both of us will beat James in followers. By the end of the day, he'll have way more than both of us.
We'll see. We'll see. All right. Well, that's probably a good, I don't know if that's a good thing to end on or not, but we'll use it anyway. Oh, I spilled my coffee. Good thing I was almost finished. No, it's fine. All right. Jacob, thank you for joining us. This has been fun to have like technical and meta conversation. Like I feel like we've kind of had different of like each of those types of conversations, but I kind of love bringing it all together from the technical background and then the teaching and like how to teach safely and finding a spot to be comfortable teaching and sharing all those things, which certainly resonate with me. So anyway, I enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you everyone for listening. If you're listening to the podcast version of this and you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a rating and review to help other people find the podcast so we can continue to have on amazing guests like Jacob and continue the conversation. In the meantime, that's all we got. Cool. Everybody watching live, we'll go ahead and end it, but thank you all for participating and sharing as well. Find us on Threads. Help me beat Brad by the end of... No, I'm just kidding. We'll see. I don't have time to like really try the new platform. Other people are going to have to hype it up for a long time before I really like invest in it. So we'll
West
see.
Boss already reverse engineered the whole thing and made a CLI
new
client.
app. Yeah. I saw that. So
Yeah.
is there a public API then?
Yeah, it's a GraphQL API, and he basically just grabbed his session token and just started hitting it.
Cool. That's totally a West Boss thing to do. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to run. So I'm going to call or I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.